there's a point where the Ottawa River widens to make way for a series of islands. There's a small one hugging the rapids that's long been used by the Algonquin Anishinaabe. Officially, it's known as Fitzpatrick Island, but today it's being renamed Minamedone Namitik. In Anishinaabemowin, it means Spirit Island.
The spirit speaks to you. Everything has a spirit, no matter what it is.
After colonialism, a fur trade war, residential schools, the Algonquin receded from parts of the Ottawa River. But it was never abandoned.
The Anishinaabes, they were always here before. It was time immemorial, and we lived here. Our ancestors lived here.
So it's consequential when the Algonquin Nation begins to reclaim guardianship of the sacred waterway.
I think about the water, I think about the animals, I think about future generations and what they're going to be left with.
But this river has another legacy, one that also has no intention of going anywhere. Nuclear power, a source for low-emission energy, except that the half-life of even its least potent waste is 15 generations.
You do not put nuclear waste on a freshwater river. I don't understand the reasoning behind that.
It's enough to give anyone pause, and in the future could give a whole new meaning to the phrase, time immemorial. A good day for Perry Mongre looks a little like this, exploring Algonquin ancestral territory on a picture-perfect summer afternoon.
We're always on the land, my friend. We're always in the bush. We always have the best of the fresh air, the sunshine, even the rain is cleansing and peaceful.
The fact that he and his colleague Riley Chevrier are paid to be here is the icing on the cake. Both are from Kebawik First Nation and work for the band in environmental conservation. Together, they've crisscrossed modern-day eastern Ontario and western Quebec, the same land their ancestors traversed.
We've done bird studies, frog studies, turtle studies, fish studies where we get paid to go fishing, you know. Who can say anything bad about that lifestyle?
Chevrier agrees, but is also quick to point out it's not just waterfalls and fishing.
It's not all about looking at flowers. You gotta pick up some poop now and then.
Yeah, we are in a sense akin to a bush detective, because that's what we do, is to try and figure out what animal or animals have passed or why they're there.
Which means spending a lot of time driving off-road looking for animal scat. But when you know how to read the woods like these guys do, often they'll find something even more interesting.
We've got a nice set of wolf tracks right here. So you can see the paw here and nice wet ground. We've seen tracks here last week. We haven't identified the wolf as of yet, or wolves. So that's our job right now.
For over 20 years, Roseanne Vanchi has been working with Algonquin First Nations in forest and wildlife conservation.
Oh, right there. Look at that. Nice one.
The three of them are particularly interested in the eastern wolf, a species that has recently been listed by the federal government as threatened.
I feel like those are pretty fresh, Per. Like, since we've passed, like...
A species listed as threatened is not endangered, but is considered at risk to become so if more is not done to protect its habitat.
We're calling this one Wolfcam 1.
There are less than 1,000 eastern wolves in the Ottawa River Basin. There's one in particular Mongre and Chevrier have come to know and admire.
Here's a good one here where you can see her with the collars. She was a good size. When we trapped her, she was 28 kilograms. She traveled a fair area, say a 50 plus kilometer area. This one she seemed to travel alone, which was it was a little bit strange, because we figured she was an alpha female based on her size and her age, but she still seemed to enjoy being as a loner for most times.
The eastern wolf is built to survive harsh sub-zero temperatures, to stalk prey through heavy snow. But it struggles when the land they hunt is encroached on by humans. And the encroachment that currently most worries the Kebauik Environmental Protection Team is here, Chalk River Laboratories, the cradle of the Canadian nuclear industry.
Here, for the first time, is a look inside Canada's top-secret $20 million atomic research plant at Chalk River, Ontario.
Established in 1944, less than 200 kilometers northwest of Ottawa, this site is famous for research that led to the development of one of the most efficient and safe nuclear reactors ever created. Researchers here have gone on to win Nobel Prizes. And for decades, it was a world leader in the creation of radioisotopes for medical use. But it also supplied fuel for American nuclear warheads. And in 1952, it was home to the world's first nuclear meltdown.
Radioactive contamination is silent and deadly. Everything picks up the insidious radiations.
But then, as now, the vast potential of nuclear energy is offset by the everlasting burden of its waste.
When the Geiger counter shows an instrument to be contaminated, it must be thrown into the hot disposal barrel.
This 1947 National Film Board documentary shows the early days of Chalk River Laboratories, and ends with a warning that still reverberates today.
Waste men gather all discarded material, bury it in huge isolated dumps. Disposal of radioactive waste is a serious problem. Nothing quenches radioactivity, not burning, nor throwing in the sea, nor burying in the ground. Only time.
Much has changed since the 1940s here. Chalk River Laboratories has been absorbed into a crown corporation, Atomic Energy Canada, who pay a company named Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, commonly known as CNL, to operate it.
Imagine a new, modern, 21st century campus.
CNL is currently in the midst of a government-funded $1.2 billion facelift. But before it can be transformed into a state-of-the-art nuclear campus, nearly 80 years of radioactive legacy waste must be addressed. In a statement, CNL says, while this waste was stored according to the best practices and regulations at the time, standards have changed.
Construction of the Near Surface Disposal Facility, or NSDF, begins with the site location.
So the solution CNL is trying to get off the ground is, well, under it. They call it a Near Surface Disposal Facility. Others might call it a dump.
But you do not put nuclear waste on a freshwater river. I don't understand the reasoning behind that.
Mongrain is referring to CNL's plan to construct the facility 1.2 kilometers from the Ottawa River, where it will also eat up 37 hectares of forest. 17 of those hectares, the equivalent of about 32 football fields, will be used for the containment mound.
It is in a mountainside, and it is habitat for the deer and the wolves, and it is old-growth forest. But what it mostly is very convenient for industry to move all the waste a short distance over to there and dispose of it.
CNL declined APTN's request to tour the site or give an interview. They emphasized that the site for the waste was chosen because it's up on a ridge. So if a leak were to happen, it would slope away from the Ottawa River. In a video they produced, CNL states that a leak from the waste is highly unlikely because the facility consists of 13 layers of natural and synthetic materials. They also say it would take 7 to 12 years before it reached the Ottawa River and that they are vigilant about groundwater monitoring. The site is designed for low-level radioactive waste, things like protective clothing and soil that have become contaminated. Still, low-level radioactive waste is expected to have a half-life of 300 years. According to CNL, the near-surface disposal facility is built to last at least 550 years.
Yeah, deer crossing, eh?
Vanchi co-authored an Indigenous assessment on behalf of 2 Algonquin First Nations. From fall 2022 until spring 2023, she and Algonquin technical support staff made numerous visits to the proposed waste site. Vanchi's report reflects her concerns with CNL's wildlife assessment of the area.
I said, what about the wolves? Like, do you know if there's a wolf population using the deer yards? Well, they had collected some scat, but then I asked, well, do you have the DNA for it?
During consultations with Canada concerning uplisting the eastern wolf to threatened status, CNL confirmed they were aware of wolf pack dens on the Chalk River property, but hadn't had them genetically tested to see if they were eastern wolves. They also raised concerns of Canada that increasing protection for the eastern wolf could lead to the cancellation of the near-surface disposal facility, thereby costing the company up to $160 million. In a statement, CNL says they have always been supportive of the uplisting of the eastern wolf, and that the protection of wildlife and the local environment that supports it is an important consideration. Following their consultations with Environment Canada, CNL did confirm the presence of eastern wolves on their property. They also mentioned that a wolf den is located 3 kilometers from the disposal site construction, far enough away that it will not be damaged, but not a guarantee that the den won't be disrupted. In the end, the eastern wolf was designated threatened, but Van Schie came away perturbed from the experience.
It's been a real eye-opener to see government working that close with industry.
Welcome to the public hearing of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission.
In January of this year, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission gave CNL the go-ahead, saying that construction of the disposal facility is not likely to cause significant adverse environmental effects.
Government has many mechanisms in their tool bag that just allows them to push us aside and move forward and do what they want to do anyway.
But Kibawak First Nation does not trust the process and is taking CNL to court.
Please let me touch him.
And new evidence has since come to light that there may be good reason for this distrust, not just on the land, but for a waterway sacred to the Algonquin people, that also provides the drinking water for millions. This waterway has 3 names. English speakers call it the Ottawa River. The French, La Rivière des Outaouais. But first, it was known by the Algonquin as Kitchissibee, the Great River.
Kitchissibee is a place where our ancestors used to travel. That was their highway. This is how they kept the land protected from many different nations.
Verna Polson grew up north of here, near the Kitchissibee. On this day, she finds herself downstream. She's here to see the Chalk River site for the first time with her own eyes.
I think about the water, I think about the animals, I think about future generations and what they're going to be left with. And that's something I don't want to leave my granddaughter and my great-grandchildren, is something to deal with this nuclear waste.
Polson is singing a water song. Like many First Nations, Algonquin women are raised to be water protectors. Polson believes that it isn't a matter of if the proposed disposal facility will fail, but when.
Sometimes we talk about one day we're going to see animals glowing because of facilities like this. You know, there's a lot of people talk about stuff like that. And the fish are sick already.
There's no evidence to suggest radioactive animals are roaming the woods near the Kitchissibee. Since the late 1950s, there have been no major nuclear accidents here. But this past spring, a disturbing discovery was made in the water of the Great River.
So I was able to physically pin a sturgeon to the bottom here and grab it by the gills and extract it out of the water. And I was able to do that 10 times over in the same night.
Mary Lou Chevrier works for the Kibawak First Nations Environment Department. In her spare time, she likes to fish. And she always wanted to catch a sturgeon, but not like this.
It was concerning. I didn't know it was wrong. It wasn't something I had ever seen before in my life. Oh, I have tried for a good 20 years to catch a sturgeon fish. I've tried all different baits. I grew up hearing stories of how well that they fight in the water, and the go-to bait was dough balls that my family used to use.
Chevrier took this video as part of her job gathering information on fish spawning. What makes this so strange is that the young sturgeon are not only swimming so close to shore, but are also ignoring food, including the Chevrier family's secret, dough balls.
Some of them were actually ending up beached on shore that I had to assist back into the water. So there was definitely something out of place.
In her journal, Chevrier also noted a metallic smell in the air. Nearby, she found the carcasses of 3 other fish. What Chevrier didn't know at the time is that about a month and a half earlier, CNL, located about 25 kilometers upstream, had had a toxic wastewater leak, and that it was still ongoing.
Mother Earth can only heal herself so much, and then she needs help. She needs people to step up and people to be on their A game, you know, and report things and make the public aware of what's going on.
There's no direct evidence that links the wastewater leak to the lethargic sturgeon. But according to reporting by CBC Indigenous, non-radioactive toxic wastewater seeped into the Kitchissippi for 2 months before Environment Canada stepped in, and that CNL took 3 weeks to make it public. These emails show CNL scrambling to fix an issue with the sewage treatment plant. Even though the wastewater issue put them in violation of the Fisheries Act, CNL officials surmised that it wasn't in large enough quantities to seriously harm the environment. But documents originally obtained by CBC show that Environment Canada disagreed with CNL's assessment, and that in 2022, CNL had had a wastewater incident at the same location. In addition, emails from Atomic Energy Canada show their communications team was content to have written, quote, suitably opaque public communications on the subject. In a statement, CNL emphasized that they regularly communicate with stakeholders on environmental issues, but we are learning from this event and making changes to better address the interests of our communities. As for the length of time it took to identify and fix the problem, CNL says they had to check over 600 entry points over a dozen buildings, and the time required to receive sample results did lead to periods where information was being requested of CNL when answers were not yet available.
CNL has demonstrated to us over and over the past number of years that they say a lot of things.
Lance Haymond is the longtime chief of Kibawak First Nation. He's also the political face of Kibawak's opposition to the waste facility project.
We're taking the position that if there's a project and it causes harm to the nation as a whole, and then one of us are going to stand up and take responsibility and fight that fight on behalf of the nation.
10 of the 11 Algonquin First Nations are against the waste facility site. But the reality is, 1 million cubic meters of low-level nuclear waste is already being kept here. And the interim holding fix is not a long-term solution.
Our independent experts tell us that that type of approach can continue until such time as we find a location where the waste can be stored and where everyone is agreeable. The problem is that from the outset, there was no other site chosen simply because CNL wanted to be able to do this on the cheap.
In response, CNL argues that the site is the most responsible location for the facility as this option minimizes additional handling of the material, helps ensure worker safety, and reduces the environmental impact of transporting the waste by truck. CNL adds that it would take about 50,000 shipments to move the waste out. When we asked CNL if they had ever done a cost-benefit analysis regarding transporting the waste versus constructing a waste disposal site, they declined to discuss how much it would cost to ship the waste out.
It's about profitability. It really is not about safety. We feel that CNL will and has cut corners to be able to build this project and be able to manage it in a way that is less impactful financially.
A look into CNL documents suggests that the company is exploring how to make nuclear waste management profitable. This CNL environmental remediation document, obtained by APTN, says that business growth is a key strategic priority to enhance CNL's revenue streams. It also says they will take the opportunity to use its growing capabilities to pursue moderate growth in the decommissioning and waste management market. CNL also intends to use 5% of the near-surface site for importing nuclear waste from hospitals and universities. That's the equivalent of about 1.5 football fields. When asked about importing and storing outside nuclear waste, CNL says the hospital and university waste will be managed at cost.
Transportation of nuclear material causes us great concern, but at the same time, they're already doing it.
This is an actual size block of what the bentonite buffer blocks would look like. There are other ways to store nuclear waste, although they're usually reserved for the high-level waste with a half-life of tens of thousands of years. Deep underground repository sites like this model are already being proposed in Ontario, including in a couple of First Nations.
This is not easy. It has to be properly vetted and consulted with communities, but there might be a hard rock place without groundwater influence where it could be properly stored.
For now, the CNL near-surface waste disposal site is under judicial review, a court action undertaken by Kibawak to legally question the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission's decision to rubber stamp the site's construction. The crux of Kibawak's legal case is that Canada's approval of the waste facility site failed to take into account the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's a unique argument that will likely set a legal precedent, win or lose.
Everybody seems to be passing the buck. It really is on the federal crown to implement UNDRIP. But when they delegate responsibility for consultation to an entity like Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, it's inherent upon the Commission to take into consideration UNDRIP.
It's a significant place. There's many different areas on this waterway that has sacred sites.
This is Wazo Rock, named for the falcons that nest on the top. Home to 300-year-old Algonquin pictographs that have in recent times been covered up by graffiti.
It's heartbreaking when you see sacred sites being vandalized.
As a metaphor, the desecration of the pictographs seems heavy-handed. For many Algonquin, the symbolism hits a little too close to home.
I think it's important that we keep this place, our legacy, a part of who we are as people of this land and these waters.
In recent times, Algonquin have been working to reclaim areas like Wazo Rock and the newly renamed Spirit Island.
We're going to try our best to protect the sacred site because I think it's important that we need to do this for our ancestors who's been here way before us.
But as for the nuclear legacy on the Kichisibi, they may be in for a long haul. One that will stretch the limits of their philosophy to guard the land not only for their ancestors, but for 7 generations to come.